These globalists want to squander all of America's strength, blood, and treasure, chasing monsters and phantoms overseas. In addition, there must also be a complete commitment to dismantling the entire globalist neocon establishment that is perpetually dragging us into endless wars, pretending to fight for freedom and democracy abroad. We should have never gone into the Middle East. We should have never gone into the Middle East. Under my leadership, we will turn the page forever on those foolish, stupid days of never-ending wars. We're rebuilding our military stronger than ever before, and we are not going to deplete it again on stupid, senseless, endless wars. World War III has never been closer than it is right now. We need to clean house of all of the warmongers and America last globalists and the deep state. I am the president who delivers peace. I was the first president in decades who didn't start a war. And the worst, most incompetent, most corrupt president in history is going to drag us into World War III. And this horrible, horrible president is dragging us toward World War III. We're going to be in World War III soon. Because I think we would have been good with Iran. I don't want to do anything bad to Iran. Large sections of the Middle East. I mean, look at the death and destruction that's taken place. And none of this would have happened if I were president. Our opponents join with warmongers and neocons to wage endless wars, these wars that never end. Together we're fighting to secure our borders, end the endless foreign wars, and defend the working people of America. But the Muslim and Arab voters in Michigan and across the country want a stop to the endless wars and a return to peace in the Middle East. That's all they want. Speaking of World War III, I'll keep you out of World War III. What would happen if we had a war? We won't, with me, but you will have World War III, I believe, without me, but we won't have. I will be sure that World War III will not happen. I'm the only one can say it won't happen. But I stand here today, and I'm the only candidate who can make this promise. I will prevent, and very easily, World War III, very easily.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly. If they wanted to.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
Once Saddam has nuclear weapons, the terror network will have nuclear weapons. Next thing you'll see is a nuclear bomb in the World Trade Center. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syrian Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's stream. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Rumble. I think the next 1 hour, you don't really need to listen what I'm going to say. If you only watched this 2-minute or 3-minute video, you would come to the conclusion that, or one of the two conclusions, that Donald J. Trump is basically a big fat liar, or he's not in charge. There is no other way of seeing this. You have either lied to your teeth to millions of people to get their votes to become a president by fooling them all and telling them, I'm not going to go to war in the Middle East. Those days are over. Those were foolish wars. They have costed us trillions of dollars. We cannot do that again. We destabilized the Middle East. Millions of people were killed due to our wars. I'm the only candidate who's going to stop World War III. If you vote for me, there is not going to be war. If you vote for me, your son is not going to get killed in the Middle East. Meanwhile, they are serving as sitting ducks. For who? For whose interest? What are these soldiers of the American forces doing in the Middle East except for keeping the region under the American dominance, especially the trade and the energy routes in the region? And secondly, is the security of Israel. There is no other way of seeing this American presence in the region, that they are building up a region that is completely under their control, including all these wars that we have seen in the region. Millions of people were perished in the discourse of these conflicts and regime change operations and destabilization efforts and psychological operations, psyops, covert operations, etc. And they have been trying to encircle Iran from all sides in order to prepare for this last battle against the evil mullah regime. Please put them in between brackets, because that's the only nation and civilization in the region that is still saying no to the American dictates. Now, of course, people like our friend Sami, who is a Zionist, I'm sure he is nowadays feeling like lots of excitement about war, because this is how they were indoctrinated since they were kids, that they have to go to wars. They have to expand. They have to dominate, and they have to subjugate the population of the region under their feet. And after they are finished with the axis of Shia, they are going to go after the axis of Sunni. And after the axis of Sunni, what are they going to do? Going after the axis of what? China, Russia, Pakistan, India? What is it? Where is the limit? Where is the limit of this newly formed, that many people call Pax Judaica, which I'm not an expert of. I'm not endorsing it. I'm not saying it is a Pax Judaica, but it increasingly appears to be that the Zionist state of Israel is capitalizing on and funneling its resources and money inside the American political corridors in order to persuade, blackmail, buy as many politicians, as many officials, as many people in positions of power, as many people in tech industries, as many people in AI industries, as many people everywhere. For whose benefit? Why is this war happening? Has Iran posed any threat against the United States? The answer is no. It is the United States and Israel who initiated a war of aggression against Iran. This is the truth. Anything outside this is propaganda, is to manipulate you, is to wash your brain, and they are utter lies. This is it. This is the entire stream, could be summarized in this, how many minutes? Few minutes of rant. Now I have to drink a water again. So nowadays, there is a debate inside the United States. And this debate is, do we have a plan? Do we have a realistic plan for the day after the assassination of Ali Khamenei? Now, it seems to be that the people who whispered in the ears of Donald Trump, and those include, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu and others, that once we assassinate Ali Khamenei, which is the head of what they call the mullah regime, this will have a domino effect, because he represents the head of the hierarchy of the system there, spiritually, religiously, and also politically. And of course, his influence over the IRGC, basically. Once you kill the head, then it will crumble. Little they know that Iran is not Syria. Syria was, unfortunately, a political authoritarianism. Yes, it was secular. Yes, it was progressive. However, what they called the regime was unfortunately based on one person. And when this person was ousted, everything has collapsed. But Iran is a different political system. And the political participation in Iran is wider than in Syria. And the democratic participation in Iran is way wider, more wider than in Syria, and bigger than in Syria, in scope, in quantity, and in quality. And there are policies that are adopted inside Iran that are based on conversations and discussions among different committees in the parliament, and elections happen every, I think, 4 years, the parliamentary elections. And we have at least certain exchange of power between what they call the principalists and the reformists, and then you have a gray zone between them, and you have some independence. In addition to that, of course, just like Syria, you have certain level of religious freedoms inside Iran. But the most important thing is that Iran is a nation state. It has a centralized government, yes, but it has different pillars that stand on. And unless you destabilize the bottom of the hierarchy, not the head of the hierarchy, and in this case, the popular support for the current system in Iran, some people say it's 20%, some people say 30%, some people say 40%. We don't know, but it looks like they have a considerable number of very loyal base ready to stick with the IRGC, ready to stick with the Islamic revolutionary regime. On the other hand, you have people who are apparently do not agree with the Islamic nature of their country, but they have brains and they have the ability to connect the dots and see the patterns in the region and notice and realize that in the past 30 years, not a single place the Americans and the Israelis intervened where they brought democracy, human rights, reforms, prosperity, and economic lavish lifestyle for them. Every single place the Americans and the Israelis intervened, it ended up worse. So some people have brains and they say, no, this is not a war against the regime. This is a war against our nation, and I will stick with what we have. Some people could come and say, the evil I know is better than the evil I don't know, especially that who is the alternative? The main question that the people need to ask when they discuss about the Iranian case, who is the alternative? Is it the clown prince, the Reza Pahlavi, who has never in his entire life done anything? He didn't even manage a kindergarten. How am I, as an Iranian, as people are saying, am I supposed to believe that this clown prince who lives in Miami, basically, and he's having this lavish lifestyle, somehow he receives funding and funding and funding to continue his lavish lifestyle from where nobody knows, that somehow this guy will come back to Iran and lead the country? Nobody believes this. Even Donald Trump doesn't believe in this, that Reza Pahlavi can lead Iran. The Israelis also know. But the Israelis would be very happy to see a civil war inside Iran. So Reza Pahlavi would be a perfect candidate for them. Unlike other players in the region, although they hate and despise the Islamic Republic of Iran, but they don't want to see a civil war that could spill over into their countries, such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the rest. So they would make sure, and they would like to see a formula where the Americans would find an alternative within the regime itself, somebody who is more flexible with them, that could deal with the Americans and give them what they want when it comes to the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, etc. Now, Okay. I think there was a problem. Yes. Do you guys can see me and hear me again, right? There was just a quick technical problem. I would just check. Ah, yes, I'm back. So, therefore, the goal of the Americans was decapitate the head and try to trigger a popular uprising inside Iran so that the people would finish the job for you. That was the goal. And they failed. If this was the goal, they failed. And that's why this week, Yedaot Ahranot of Israel reported that Trump realized Iranian regime will not fall immediately, aims to end military operations soon, says the commentator Nahum Barnea, and he says that US proposed quick ceasefire, but Tehran rejected the offer. So why would Tehran reject the offer? Why would Iran reject a ceasefire offer? Because so far, one of the researchers and analysts on Middle East, his name is Mustafa Najafi, he perfectly said, so far, Iran has declined 3 requests for mediation. From Tehran's perspective, the country possesses the capacity and preparedness to sustain a high-intensity conflict for a period of approximately 60 to 90 days. Within this strategic calculus, accepting a ceasefire in the early stages would not constitute an advantage. Rather, it could carry greater long-term strategic costs than continuing the confrontation. So, Iran thinks that this war has to be prolonged, probably for a month or 2. They want to exhaust the resources of the United States, including the supply chains of the Americans when it comes to sending the ammunition and the weapons back to the region, because they are basically exhausting and using many of their Tomahawk missiles nowadays. And some of the reports said they already used 10% of their stockpile in this only last 2-3 days. Guys, please stop these comments like, why do you disrespect Iran by calling their government a regime? I literally said, Yedaot Ahranot reported that. Please listen when I'm talking. It bothers me when people don't listen and come and try to lecture me. I'm saying what the newspaper said about Iran, not me calling them a regime. So please focus when I'm saying, because many people come and listen regime and are like, oh my God, Kevork is using the term regime. He's a Zionist, and start making comments. Please listen what I'm saying. I'm literally quoting the Israeli newspaper while they're calling Iran and the Iranian government a regime. So it is on them. It is not on me. Please listen so that we understand what is going on. So some people asked me at the beginning that how do you know that Donald Trump doesn't have a plan? And I didn't say he doesn't have a plan. I didn't say he doesn't have a plan. But many of the newspapers these days in the West are saying that Donald Trump doesn't have a realistic plan for Iran. And this is the first article, and that is from the Financial Times. The Financial Times says, Trump has no realistic plan for Iran's future. Okay. So what is the premise? Trump is now committed to a process for which there is no real precedent. Regime change brought about by air power alone. So this is what Trump is betting on, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, that decapitate the leadership and try to trigger an uprising on the ground so the people could do the regime change for you. And that's why Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu both said and told the Iranian people to rise up against their own government, which up until this moment didn't happen. So the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei, now that I'm reading the newspaper, right? If they call them bad names, this is the newspaper, not me. So the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei and several key Iranian military and political leaders on the first day of the war has left the regime reeling. Kevork, why are you calling them regime? Well, it's the Wall Street Journal. But it doesn't answer the question of what comes next. What comes after the assassination of Khamenei? Now, Trump posted a video and told the IRGC with a straight face, lay down your weapons. take over your government. This was the advice for the IRGC and for the Iranian people. For the IRGC, he's telling them, lay down your weapons. And for the people, he's telling them, take over your government, which nothing of this sort happened. So these instructions were tellingly short on specifics. The IRGC is being bombed from the air. Even if its troops decided to abandon their weapons, there is no alternative authority or army inside Iran to surrender them to. Not that they will surrender, but even if, hypothetically, they surrendered, who is going to fill the vacuum in terms of the security and the military vacuum? No one. And that's why we believe that if the goal was to cause this type of regime change through so-called uprising, then this will lead into civil war. The hope seems to be that the decapitation of the Iranian leadership and the destruction of the regime's military might will lead to some kind of organic and spontaneous transition to a new political system without the need for further US intervention. But there is little reason to believe that will work. I truly don't know if this was the goal. If this was the goal, this would be very, very naive of Trump to believe. From the point of view of the Netanyahu government, so this is Netanyahu government's perspective, guys, not my perspective, okay? The current set of circumstances is a historic opportunity to take out a dangerous foe. The Israelis presumably have calculated that they can handle Iran's retaliatory missile assaults, and it is highly unlikely that Israeli troops will ever be called upon to deploy in Iran. So, it will be others who are left to deal with the chaotic aftermath of the bombing campaign. The strategic calculations for the Gulf states and the US itself are much more complicated. The UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia have marketed themselves. This is very important, guys. These countries have marketed themselves to the world as affluent safe havens for people and capital. But they have all now been hit or targeted by Iranian missiles. So if the conflict is somehow brought to a swift conclusion, or Iran runs out of missiles and drones, then the Gulf states may be able to dismiss the current hostilities as a bad few days and return to business as usual. But if they are permanently affected by prolonged war, their safe haven status will be at serious risk. And this is what Iran is doing at the current moment. They are interested now in a war of attrition, in a longer war. That's why they're rejecting the ceasefire offers from the American side, because they believe a prolonged war will destabilize the image and the illusion that these Gulf countries have formed and established and basically promoted and marketed through their PR agencies and media outlets and their lobbyists all around the world, that this is a safe haven for capital and for people. And that's why you see many people from all around the world are moving to the UAE, because for them, this is a safe haven where they can basically live in a warm place. They can generate lots of money. The income is high. You don't have an income tax. You can also use Bitcoin. So many people move there, basically, in order to benefit from this situation. But this situation is basically built on the premise and the image that the UAE, Saudi Arabia are basically islands surrounded by destabilized countries, right? So those countries, there would be no war at all. This is the image they sold about themselves, and this is what Iran is trying to destroy, which is the illusion that these countries are safe. Because once there is now a widespread conviction among all these investors in these countries that these countries are no longer safe, then rest assured, in a matter of few weeks, these countries will lose billions and billions and billions of dollars. And not only that, this will be a long-term damage, because in the future, people will say, what if a repeated war happens between Iran and these countries? So they don't want to do that. And that's why the Iranians have focused a lot on the Emirates by hitting them, and also Bahrain and Kuwait and other places, but mostly inside the UAE itself. And I'm going to explain to that more in depth later in this stream, because they want to basically shatter the bubble that the Emirate has created about itself, and that is, this is a safe haven for everyone. You can move in, you can bring your capital assets, bitcoins, etc. Don't have to pay taxes. You can party every day because the weather is nice. You have drinks and everything. That's why you see Iran is sending very cheap, non-damaging small drones just hitting the buildings of some of the bars and the hotels, not to kill people, but just to create panic. Just to create panic among the people there. Because they, as I said, they want to destroy this bubble of the UAE. And once you destroy that bubble of the UAE, or if the officials of the UAE see that, holy shit, this is now out of control and we will lose big time, then the Emiratis and the Saudis will lobby inside the United States and to try to end the war, because the Iranians know that this is Israel's war against them. As much as they hate Israel, Israel is used for 80 years to be in war. The people are well prepared. They have the bunkers. They have the weapons. They have the air defense systems. They have the American batteries everywhere protecting the skies of Israel. Not that they are efficient, but all in all, they have lots of weapons trying to protect the skies of Israel, unlike in the UAE or in Saudi Arabia. Those are easy targets for the Iranians, and that's why the Iranians are targeting the easy targets in the Gulf countries in order to put pressure on these monarchies, so that these monarchies would put pressure on Donald Trump. This is the goal. Okay. It's the same thing happened again with the camera. So let's see. We will come back, guys, don't worry. So let me see myself. I have to zoom in a little bit. So that's why, in short, Iran is hitting these Gulf countries. So let's go back to the article, which raises some also important points. The risks for the US and the Trump administration are also very high. Trump has shown no appetite for a prolonged conflict, but if the Gulf states are seriously threatened or Iran descends into chaos, America will come under pressure to commit further resources to the region to bring the situation back under control. So it seems that this USB device is giving me some difficult time. Let's see again. Okay. Okay, I'm back. So let me just bring this back. Okay. So the domestic political risks for Trump are considerable, right? After the trauma of 9/11, the American people were strongly in favor of both the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. For example, the Afghanistan war, guys, had 90% consensus and approval among the American people. The war against Iraq had 70% approval among the American people. And in both cases, there was a strong bipartisan support in Congress. Now, the war against Iran has 27% of support among the American people. This is according to the YouGov poll only last week. So it seems that the American people have learned the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan, unlike their government, because as we already mentioned several times on the show, the people that we see on screens, they're not the ones making the decisions. If you vote for Trump, if you vote for Hillary Clinton, if you vote for Barack Obama, if you vote for Joe Biden, if you vote for this other woman, what was her name? I even forgot the candidate of the Democrats in this last elections. Anyways, this war was going to happen because Benjamin Netanyahu and what he represents and who he represents, they have infiltrated every political power structure, financial structure inside the United States, and they have built a network of alliances of people who see their interests are best served if the interests of the Israelis are best served as well. So let's zoom in a little bit. I think that's better. Yes, Kamala Harris. I even forgot her name since she's not relevant at all nowadays. So we have, guys, a situation nowadays that the situation is not only dangerous for the allies of the United States in the region, namely in the Arab Gulf or in the Persian Gulf monarchies, but rather also for the forces of the US in the region. So we have now at least 3 American servicemen have been killed. Of course, the Iranians are saying the numbers are higher than that. We don't know. So this is only yesterday. This report is from yesterday. 3 US troops were killed and 5 others seriously wounded amid ongoing hostilities with Iran. The 3 slain Americans were part of a sustainment unit in Kuwait, 2 US officials told the Washington Post. And then less than 2 days after military operations reflected what one US officials described as a very aggressive effort to knock out as many of Iran's capabilities to launch missiles and drones as quickly as possible. Still, however, overnight, military officials in US operation centers tracked dozens and dozens of missiles and attack drones launched by Iran throughout the night, said another person familiar with the situation. And he said Iran is in full retaliation. The vast number of retaliatory attacks and the array of sites being targeted, including non-military sites in Arab nations across the Middle East, is concerning after so much of the regime's top leadership was killed. This person continued. Officials are worried about the command and control of those weapons, the person added. Now, inside the Pentagon and among some members of the Trump administration, there was deepening concern Sunday that the Iran conflict could spiral out of control. They said the mood here is intense and paranoid. There is anxiety among senior leaders that the fighting will extend for weeks, further stressing limited U.S. air defense stockpiles, people familiar with the situation said. So the House Armed Services Committee's top Democrat, Representative Adam Smith, said this operation will force the U.S. to further expand munition supplies that are already strained because they are sending many of them to Israel and Ukraine. He said at this point, it's on. It's not like we can say, hey, Iran, we are out of missile defense systems now, so we are going to pause for a moment. Is that okay? The US has a vast amount of firepower in the region, including 9 destroyers capable of shooting down missiles. But videos circulating online show that one of the other major threats US troops face is from Iran's fleet of Shahed drones, which fly slow and low and are not optimal targets for US air defenses. So there are so many, guys, articles this week, as you can see, warning and saying that victory is not at reach. We don't know if we can do regime change, and we are not sure if this aerial campaign could lead into a certain, let's say, urge whoever is against the government, the system, call it whatever you like, to go against and do a coup or an uprising. There is not even defections among the IRGC. So how are we going to do this? People are asking these serious questions, and I think the people have the right to ask these questions, because if the goal is regime change, now we have a situation where Iran is telling the Americans and the Israelis, we are interested in a prolonged war. And that changed the calculus, in my opinion, in the region, because now Iran is firing in a very calculated manner. They have enough stockpile for a prolonged war, let's say for 60 days, the least to say. And can the Emirates sustain 60 days of war? Or let's paraphrase it. Can the Emirates and the Emirati people and these let's say, expat community in the UAE tolerate and sustain 60 days of daily drones flying over their heads and hitting some buildings and some bars and some hotels? The answer is no. So this is the bet. Let's see how it will proceed. And remember, guys, whatever we say on this show, whatever you read in the internet, whatever I personally tell you, the situation is changing every single minute. So whatever I say now could be literally shifted and changed in an hour, not even an hour, in 5 minutes. Maybe I'm talking now and some breaking news happening there. Maybe Israel nuked Iran already, right? So just be conscious that the situation is moving very, very fast, forward and backward, and we don't know how this could end. And nobody can really come and say that they know exactly that this is the situation. Let me check this one if I have to show you. Okay, so there is let's say an evaluation by the CIA, which was reported today by the Reuters, and they're both saying here that U.S. official with knowledge of internal White House deliberations said IRGC officials are unlikely to voluntarily capitulate, in part because they have benefited from a vast patronage network designed to maintain internal loyalty. Now, of course, they will always try to find some shady reasons why the IRGC officials aren't going to defect. They will never tell you that, probably because they believe that this is their country and this is their nation and that they have to protect it and they have to defend it and they have to die for it. Probably I'm saying that's also one of the reasons why they are not defecting. So the CIA assessments followed at least one report from a separate U.S. intelligence agency, which noted that there had been no IRGC defections during a massive round of anti-government protests in January that was met with brutal force by Iranian security forces. Such defections would likely be a precondition of any successful revolution, according to 3 additional sources. Those sources requested that the specific intelligence agency not to be named. Now, I have to make few statements here. I'm not saying at all that there are no people in IRGC who are probably ready to collaborate with Israel and the United States. I mean, you know better than I do that the Mossad and the other intelligence agencies in Israel, in the US, in Britain, they have been trying to infiltrate the Iranian power structures for decades. And the assassinations, decapitations indicate that at least they have some people inside. Of course, they can use their data collection systems, they can spy on their smartphones, they can spy on the telecommunications, they can gather data through the satellites, etc., etc. But at the same time, they definitely have people within the corridors of the system itself, right? I'm not saying these people do not exist. In every country, this type of people exist. But there are 2 things that I have to mention here. One, and I say this with a heavy heart, right? I'm not saying this, I'm not proud of saying this, but Trump and Netanyahu thought by killing Khamenei, there will be mass protests in the street. People will go against what they call the regime, and they will do an uprising and remove them from power. Little they know, it seems that little they know that the Iranian people are not the Syrian people. And I'm Syrian. Little they know that the Iranian people in general are not like the Syrian people in general. Unfortunately, and I say this with a heavy heart again, that I have seen considerable number of Syrians inside Syria and outside Syria who have shown intentions of collaboration with an enemy country or an enemy government. Unfortunately, many inside the Syrian military have defected and deserted to an enemy side for a little money, very, very little money. The Qataris have led the campaign of defections inside the Syrian military by bribing them, since 2011. And many of them, of course, many, when I say tens of them, from the senior positions, have defected. Very, very sad that I have to make this statement, because the Iranians, looks like, especially the people who live inside the country, they have come to a collective political consciousness, and they have established a historical understanding of the region better than the Syrian people have done. And this has nothing to do with Shia, Sunni, Persian, Arab, etc. Maybe some people would argue otherwise. I'm not sure. I don't have an evidence for it. But it looks like the Iranian people put these Pahlavis aside. The Pahlavis are here. They are in Berlin, they're in Paris, they're in Brussels, they are everywhere, but not in Iran, right? And it looks like the people inside Iran, they have formed this collective political consciousness and historical understanding of the region that it is not possible for them to put their hands in the hands of the Israelis and the Americans in this case. This is how they see. So it will be more difficult, a lot more difficult for the Americans to achieve regime change, behavioral change in Iran. Although Iranians have shown lots of flexibility, to the extent that many people criticized Iran for showing that flexibility, right? So there is one more very important, by the way, report this week, because remember, once the attack happened against Iran, every single Western official, mainstream media outlet, everybody is like, this is a preemptive attack against Iran because Iran was going to attack us. BS. That never happened. I already told you that only a few days ago on Saturday. And now we have in the Reuters, they're just saying the same thing. Of course, what we say a few days earlier is a conspiracy theory. And then when they admit it a few days later, it's just a fact, right? So Pentagon tells Congress, no sign that Iran was going to attack US first. That never happened. So what I highlighted this article. I think there was something called decade or something here that I have... decade. So the United States and Israel, decades. Let me again, decade. Okay, there is only one. So anyways, apparently, according to this article, there was no reason to attack Iran in an allegedly preemptive war because Iran has never intended on or willing to strike the United States assets in the region, or the United States itself, let alone because they're like 13,000 kilometers away. And therefore, the logic of preemption doesn't stand here. And if you don't believe the US officials, you have to believe at least the mediator in this case, right? And who is the mediator? Is Oman in this case. And what does the Omani foreign minister says in this regard? He was on a TV outlet only recently, guys. So Oman's foreign minister says Iran agreed to zero enriched uranium stockpiling. Imagine the Swiss, I mean, some people would say this is suicidal, right, for Iran. But this is what the Iranian foreign minister is telling, basically.
What has Iran agreed to you that they have never done before? Can you give us any sense?
The single most important achievement, I believe, is the agreement that Iran will never, ever have a nuclear material that will create a bomb. This is, I think, a big achievement. This is something that is not in the old deal that was negotiated during President Obama's time. This is something.
So imagine the the concessions that the Iranians have given to Trump are bigger than the concessions they have given during 2015 JCPOA agreement between the Democratic administration and the Iranians back in the day.
Completely new. It really makes the enrichment argument less relevant, because now we are talking about zero stockpile. That is very, very important, because if you cannot stockpile material that is enriched, then there is no way you can actually create a bomb, whether you enrich or don't enrich. And I think this is really something that has been missed a lot by the media, and I want to clarify that from the standpoint of a mediator.
So, guys, as you can see, and as you heard, this is not me telling you, this is the foreign minister of Iran, of Oman, saying basically Iran agreed to zero enriched uranium stockpiling, but hours later, Israel and the United States launched the attacks anyways. So this was never a preemptive strike, but this was a war of aggression. And I would encourage you to use the terminologies correctly when you are also reporting or posting on social media platforms, because it's important to create and normalize the correct literature and the reporting on the war against Iran. This is a war of aggression against Iran. Guys, as you're watching this stream, I would like to thank you all for tuning in, whether on YouTube or on Rumble. This is not the end of the stream, of course. Just to thank you all, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Rumble. And special thanks to our moderator at Access for moderating the live chat always. And also Johan is present today. And I can see that there is some debate happening also in the live chat. I appreciate you all, guys. Whether you agree with me, you disagree with me, everybody is welcomed, as long as we are being just nice. Like when I say nice, just don't curse each other's mothers. That's the thing. So I would also like to ask you kindly, also as our moderator said, please leave a like. As you're watching this, guys, it's the easy thing to do. Just hold your smartphone or your PC or on whatever browser you're watching. Just hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to Syriana Analysis as you're watching. It really helps me a lot to reach to wider audiences and also to invite other guests to the show. That would be amazing from your side. And Red Access, I have to say this also to you live. My apologies, I couldn't respond to emails in the past 1 week. I swear to God, I was so overwhelmed with lots of work. And on Saturday, which was my vacation, I did another live stream. And Sunday, I was like dead, just sitting here on the couch and chilling and going to the gym. I really couldn't. I can't really, it's too much to stay in front of the screen many hours per day. And I received lots of emails because I put also my email, my public email on Syriana Analysis. Many people send me emails. Unfortunately, sometimes I'm really it's too overwhelming, to do everything. And the job of preparing the analysis and the commentaries and the materials also take and consume a lot of time. So unlike Oman, my friends, which did the great job and mediated between the US and the Iranians in this case, we had another country in the region, which in my opinion, they should have mediated, but they were secretly trying to urge Donald Trump to strike Iran, and that is the Saudi Arabia. This is reported by the Washington Post, by the way. So the Washington Post claims that President Trump launched Saturday's wide-ranging attacks on Iran after weeks-long lobbying effort by an unusual pair of U.S. allies in the Middle East, and those are Israel and Saudi Arabia. Crazy. I'm really baffled to read this report. I don't know if it's correct, but the Saudis didn't deny it. So MBS basically made multiple private phone calls to Trump over the past month, advocating a U.S. attack, despite his public support for a diplomatic solution. The attack came despite U.S. intelligence assessments that Iran's forces were unlikely to pose an immediate threat to the U.S. mainland within the next decade. I mean, I'm sure this is half the truth, right? Iran would not have posed against the US mainland, not in the next decade, not in the next century. That was not going to happen anyways. So, in any ways, this assessment is half the truth. They were unlikely to pose an immediate threat to the US mainland. Just within the next decade is just a bollock, in my opinion. Now, Trump will bear the risk of the bet he has placed that a major military operation conducted from the air can achieve political goals on the ground. As those talks proceeded, Riyadh issued a statement following a phone call between MBS and Masoud Pezeshkian that MBS would not allow Saudi airspace or territory to be used in an attack on Iran. In his discussions with US officials, however, so he was telling one thing to the Iranians, and then he was telling the Americans another thing. And the Saudi leader warned that Iran would come away stronger and more dangerous if the US didn't strike now, after amassing the largest military presence in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. MBS's position was reinforced by his brother, the Saudi Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman, who had closed-door meetings with US officials in Washington in January and warned about the downsides of not attacking Iran. So the Saudi leader's complicated position probably reflected his desire to avoid Iranian retaliation against his country's vulnerable oil infrastructure, weighed against his view of Tehran as Riyadh's ultimate foe in the region, said those familiar with the matter. So apparently MBS and his brother were telling Donald Trump, on one hand, that he has to strike Iran because bringing all these weapons and amassing them in the region, deployment, reinforcement, etc., if you don't bomb them, then Iran would come more powerful from this, and this could also pose a threat to the Saudi allies in the region, for example, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, elsewhere, right? Also in Yemen. So the Saudis have been telling Pezeshkian, of course, the weakest president in the history of Iran anyways, that no, Habibi, we're not interested in this war. We're not going to allow the airspace of Saudi Arabia to be used against you. But at the same time, according to the Washington Post, allegedly, that MBS have had 2 private top-secret phone calls with Donald Trump, and he has sent his brother, the defense minister, to Washington, D.C. in closed-door meetings with Trump, trying to persuade them and convince him to strike Iran. Right? So, I have to tell you guys that this war apparently has reached to a point where now American people started asking questions about, for example, what are our pilots doing in the region, to the extent that some of them have been now falling. And today, Kuwait's defense ministry says that several, so we don't know the number of them, probably there are 10, probably there are 5, probably there are 3. He says several US military aircraft have crashed. And this is a video showing, basically, let me check. Yeah. So this is a video basically showing one of the pilots is apparently jumped from a helicopter. So this is the fighter jet has fallen, as you can see, and this is the pilot has jumped from the with the parachute, right? And they say several US military aircraft have crashed. So they're also trying to hide the number. We really don't know how many of them. Probably, I don't know. If you say several, they have to be over 3, right? And it seems that the Saudis and the Emiratis and others in the region are upset also at the United States at the current moment because the Americans aren't able to protect them from these attacks, right? So this is a Saudi official basically on Al Jazeera, and I'm going to play this not on a wide screen, but only like this, because probably Jazeera will come after me and try to sue me for playing a very short segment under 1 minute video to you. And he says, American defense is focused on Israel without concern for the defense of the Arab Gulf states, which host many of the military bases. So basically, Saudi officials going to Qatari Al Jazeera and complaining that basically what the Americans have done, they have prepared for war against Iran, and they have amassed all their defense capabilities around Israel, meanwhile leaving us exposed to the Iranian missiles, right?
الدفاع الأمريكي مركز على إسرائيل دون دول الخليج التي تقع فيها كثير من القواعد العسكرية. وما في شك أنا في تقديري أعتقد أن هناك يعني نوع من العتب الخليجي على
There is a resentment from these Gulf countries towards their ally, the United States.
أو الشريك إذا وصفناه بدقة الشريك الأمريكي الذي يركز على أمن إسرائيل واستقرار إسرائيل وسكان إسرائيل دون الاهتمام بالجوانب الدفاعية في دول الخليج العربية التي.
So we have to say we could tell this Saudi official صح النوم حبيبي صح النوم like صباح الخير. Finally, maybe somebody has woken up in Saudi Arabia. They're like, oh my, look at these Americans, our partners. They show no concern for our security. And they are basically defending Israel, unlike us. They're not doing anything for us. So how is this even partnership? How is this even ally, right? I mean, I think the Saudis should have learned this in, when was this, 2016, 2017, when Aramco came under attack from the Yemenis, and the Americans haven't shown any interest in defending them. But these attacks are not only happening against Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, but also against Qatar. And today, guys, this is the Qatar Energy, Qatar Energy company. They released a statement saying that Qatar will shut down all its LNG production, 14 trains, and they are suggesting that roughly 20% of the world's output will be stopped now. And some of the reports say that the prices of LNG, liquefied natural gas in Europe, has increased 50% today because of this, because Qatar Energy stopped the production of LNG due to military attacks on Qatar Energy's operating facilities in Ras Laffan industrial city and many other industrial cities inside Qatar, and they have ceased production of liquefied natural gas and associated products. Qatar Energy values its relationship with all of its stakeholders and will continue to communicate the latest available information. So Qataris have also received a big blow now from the Iranians. But I would like to mention one thing, and that is about the Emirates and why the Iranians have been focusing more on the Emirates in this case. Because apparently there are also some CIA operation rooms in the UAE, and one of the circulating reports nowadays, and this is unconfirmed report, but many people are circulating it, they say that 6 senior CIA officers were killed in the UAE after precision strike hit a residence used by agency personnel in Dubai, with 2 others reportedly injured. The strike is described as part of the missile barrage launched by the IRGC yesterday. So allegedly, I'm saying that some of the CIA operatives were in the UAE. But I think this is the main reason why they are basically hitting the UAE. And we are not endorsing it. So just for you to know, we are not endorsing violence against the UAE, against Saudi Arabia, against Bahrain, against Qatar, against anyone. We are explaining here why the Iranians are hitting the basically the UAE here. And this person says, why striking Dubai is deviously genius. He says, it's all about cost benefit. Israel has been under constant missile and rocket attacks for 40 years. They don't care. US bases in the region are prepared to deal with these attacks. And I think also they have lots of bunkers. Dubai is not at all prepared, and its population has no stomach for a prolonged campaign. 2-3 days of this, and there will be a widespread panic in Dubai. Meanwhile, Dubai has great leverage over Trump. Remember all those Trump coins, personal investments, and donation to the Board of Peace? I think they invested like around $1 trillion in the US. Striking Dubai makes it very costly for Trump to keep the war going, and Iran is a cornered beast. They don't care about future relations with the UAE. For the UAE, this is a damage control. They need the attacks to stop now. They can't prioritize revenge or political motives. They will push Trump to end the war very quickly. So let me see if there is anything I could show you. I've been saving lots of material today and planning for 1 hour, but it seems it will go a little bit over 1 hour. Let me just delete a few. This too. Okay. So I will show you a short video of Professor Chang, who I told you I sent him a message. He didn't open the message yet. I will again try to insist, and I will try to find a different way of contacting him. I promise you of that. I'm after it. One day, Professor Chang will be on this show. I promise you. It just needs a little bit of time for me to have the proper contacts, because at the same time, you know, these, how to say, this so-called career on YouTube is also very competitive. Many people do not want to share the contacts. So I will find the best way of having his contact without trying to beg someone to give me the contact. But Professor Chang has made some interesting points here. You can listen and make up your own mind. Every actor in this war wanted the same thing. The US wants regime change in Tehran. Iran wants to trap and humiliate America. Israel and Saudi Arabia want both of them to destroy each other. This is an interesting point that now if you connect it to what the Washington Post has said, that both Saudi Arabia and Israel have lobbied, basically, and tried to persuade Donald Trump to bomb Iran. Now, Professor Chang also says that Israel and Saudi Arabia want for both Iran and the USA to fight each other because they want them to destroy each other. And he says this isn't war, it's controlled demolition. So I will show you this video, guys. I will just disappear myself a little bit until we watch this video. Take a look.
So these are 3 historical examples that are very similar to what could happen in Iran. Okay, does that make sense, guys? All right, any questions before I continue? All right, is this clear so far? All right, now let's use another mode of analysis called game theory analysis, okay? And this is what I've been teaching you this semester. And the idea is that society, what happens in the real world, is a game among human beings, okay? And each person is trying to play this game as to optimize the outcome for that person. Okay? So the question then is, why would the United States send 100,000 troops into Iran? So let's look at the individual motivations of the individual players, okay? So you have the United States. What does the United States want to do? What does it want to do by doing what and accomplishing what? It wants to topple the regime in Tehran, right? And you can only do that through a ground invasion, okay? So the United States is trying to topple Iran. But then you also have other actors, okay? So Iran, what does Iran want to do? What does Iran want to do? Or basically the Revolutionary Guard Corps. What do they want to do? Right? They want to kill as many Americans as possible, okay? You understand? They want to force an American landing invasion, okay? So Iran wants to force a US invasion, knowing that if the US invades, it has to lose the war, okay? It will lose the war, because the Revolutionary Guard can just send suicide bombers against the United States, okay? Now let's look at Israel. We know that the United States wants to topple Iran. We know that Iran wants to force a US invasion to defeat the Americans, to humiliate the Americans, and exact revenge for what happened in the past, okay? What does Israel want to do? What is Israel's optimal outcome? You guys know? If you're Israel, what do you want to happen? Okay, so you want Iran defeated, okay? And then what do you want to happen? You want Iran defeated, you want the proxies defeated, and then what do you want to happen? Do you want the United States to stay in the Middle East? What happens if the United States and Iran both lose the war? I mean, Iran is destroyed as a country, the United States is destroyed as a military presence in the Middle East. What would happen? Israel becomes the top dog in the Middle East. Do you understand? Okay? Israel can now control the entire Middle East. So the optimal outcome for Israel is Iran and the United States are both destroyed. Okay? You understand? How about Saudi Arabia? What is their optimal outcome? Exactly the same as Israel. Exactly. Okay? You understand? Okay? Which will leave the Middle East to Saudi Arabia and Israel. But Israel is a far superior military than Saudi Arabia. Okay? Remember, it's very easy to blow up Saudi Arabia. They have oil fields. Okay?
So, according to Professor Chang, one of the goals or one of the reasons why Saudi Arabia and Israel both were lobbying and trying to trigger this war against Iran is because they want a weakened American presence in the region so they could establish a new order between the Saudis and the Israelis, but the Saudis will definitely not be the dominant power in this case, but rather the Israelis. And this comes under the umbrella of what is called Pax Judaica. Now, some people say, of course, that's a nonsense. Some people say this is not true. However, it makes sense. It makes sense, and you know it. And many people said lots of things about other people. It's a nonsensical. This is a conspiracy theory. This is all this stuff. And then it turned out to be correct, including people like Professor Chang. So always take things critically, let's say. Do not dismiss it completely. Do not say this is, let's say, a bullock, for example, when somebody says something like this, especially if this person is smart. And I'm sure that if you watched his long format videos, like he does 1.5 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour lectures, you will not say this is a nonsense. I think you will understand him even better. But in any ways, we could ask all these questions to him, to Professor Chang, when he comes to Syriana analysis, I promise you. So if you guys are, let's say, excited about this type of conversation, I would be very happy and pleased if you simply just hit the like button, thumbs up, guys, to this stream, subscribe to Syriana Analysis, and I will see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Tomorrow, highly likely, is going to be an Iranian guest with us, so stay tuned for that, guys. And thank you so much for the moderators, for the red access, and also for Johan for being with us, guys. Tomorrow is highly likely it's going to be an Iranian guest with me. I'm coordinating, I'm texting, and I will definitely want to have more elaboration and more in-depth conversation about everything that we have spoken. Peace be upon you guys and upon your families, and see you tomorrow. Salam.